Philip K. Dick's Dr. Bloodmoney, or How We Got Along After the Bomb, published 1965. Chapter 1. Early in the bright sun-yellowed morning, Stuart McConchie swept the sidewalk before Modern TV Sales and Service. Hearing the cars along Shattuck Avenue and the secretaries hurrying on high heels to their offices, all the stirrings and fine smells of a new week, a new time in which a good salesman could accomplish things. He thought about a hot roll and coffee for his second breakfast along about 10. He thought of customers who he had talked to returning to buy, all of them perhaps today, his book of sales running over, like that cup in the Bible. As he swept, he sang a song from a new Bobby Greco album, and he thought too how it might feel to be famous. A world-famous great singer that everyone paid to see at such places as Harrah's in Reno, or the fancy expensive clubs in Las Vegas, which he'd never seen but heard so much about. He was 26 years old, and he'd driven, late on certain Friday nights, from Berkeley along the great 10-lane highway to Sacramento and across the Sierras to Reno, where one could gamble and find girls. He worked for Jim Ferguson, the owner of Modern TV, on a salary and commission basis, and, being a good salesman, he made plenty. And anyhow, this was 1981, and business was not bad. Another good year, booming from the start, where America got bigger and stronger and everybody took more home. "Morning, Stuart." Nodding, the middle-aged jeweller from across Shattuck Avenue passed by, Mr. Crody, on his way to his own little store. All the stores, the offices opening now. It was after 9, and even Dr. Stockstill, the psychiatrist and specialist in psychosomatic disorders, appeared, key in hand, to start up his high-paying enterprise in the glass-sided office building, which the insurance company had built with a bit of its surplus money. Dr. Stockstill had parked his foreign car in the lot. He could afford to pay $5 a day. And now came the tall, long-legged, pretty secretary of Dr. Stockstill's, a head taller than he. And, sure enough, as Stuart watched, leaning on his broom, the furtive first nut of the day sidled guiltily towards the psychiatrist's office. It's a world of nuts, Stuart thought, watching. Psychiatrists make a lot. If I had to go to a psychiatrist, I'd come and go by the back door. Nobody'd see me and jeer. He thought, maybe some of them do. Maybe Stockstill has a back door. For the sicker ones, or rather, he corrected his thought, the ones who don't want to make a spectacle out of themselves. I mean the ones who simply have a problem, for instance, worry about the police action in Cuba, and who aren't nuts at all, just concerned. And he was concerned, because there was still a good chance that he might be called up for the Cuban War, which had now become bogged down in the mountains once more, despite the new little anti-personnel bombs that picked out the greasy gooks no matter how well dug in. He himself did not blame the president. It wasn't the president's fault that the Chinese had decided to honor their pact. It was just that hardly anyone came home from fighting the greasy gooks free of virus bone infections. A 30-year-old combat veteran returned looking like some dried mummy left out of doors to hang for a century. And it was hard for Stuart McConchie to imagine himself picking up once more after that, selling stereo TV again, resuming his career in retail selling. "Morning, Stu," a girl's voice came, startling him. The small, dark-eyed waitress from Edie's candy store. "Daydreaming so early?" She smiled as she passed on by along the sidewalk. "Heck no," he said, again, sweeping vigorously. Across the street, the furtive patient of Dr. Stockstill's, a man black in colour, black hair and eyes, light skin, wrapped tightly in a big overcoat, itself the colour of deep night, paused to light a cigarette and glance about. Stuart saw the man's hollow face, the staring eyes and the mouth, especially the mouth. It was drawn tight, and yet the flesh hung slack, as if the pressure, The tension there had long ago ground the teeth and the jaw away. The tension remained there in that unhappy face, and Stuart looked away. Is that how it is, he wondered, to be crazy? Corroded away like that, as if devoured by... He did not know what by. Time, or perhaps water. Something slow, but which never stopped. He had seen such deterioration before, in watching the psychiatrist's patients come and go, but never this bad, never this complete. The phone rang from inside modern TV, and Stuart turned to hurry toward it. When next he looked out onto the street, the black-wrapped man had gone, and once more the day was regaining its brightness, its promise and smell of beauty. Stuart shivered, picked up his broom. I know that man, he said to himself. I've seen his picture, or he's come into the store. He's either a customer, an old one, maybe even a friend of Ferguson's, or he's an important celebrity. Thoughtfully, he swept on. To his new patient, Dr. Stockstill said, Cup of coffee? Or tea? Or Coke? He read the little card which Miss Purcell had placed on his desk. Mr. Tree, he said aloud. Any relation to the famous English literary family? Iris Tree? Max Beerbohm? In a heavily accented voice, Mr. Tree said, That is not actually my name, you know. He sounded irritable and impatient. It occurred to me as I talked to your girl. Dr. Stockstill glanced questioningly at his patient. I am world famous, Mr. Tree said. I'm surprised you don't recognize me. You must be a recluse, or worse. He ran a hand shakily through his long black hair. There are thousands, even millions of people in the world who hate me and would like to destroy me. So naturally, I have to take steps. I have to give you a made-up name. He cleared his throat and smoked rapidly at his cigarette. He held the cigarette European style, the burning end within, almost touching his palm. Oh my God, Dr. Stockstill thought. This man, I do recognize him. This is Bruno Bluthgeld, the physicist. And he's right. A lot of people, both here and in the East, would like to get their hands on him because of his miscalculation back in 1972. Because of the terrible fallout from the high-altitude blast which wasn't supposed to hurt anyone. Bluthgeld's figures proved it in advance. Do you want me to know who you are? Dr. Stockstill asked. Or shall we accept you simply as Mr. Tree? It's up to you. Either way is satisfactory to me. Let's simply get on, Mr. Tree grated. All right. Dr. Stockstill made himself comfortable, scratched with his pen against the paper on his clipboard. Go ahead. Does an inability to board an ordinary bus, with perhaps a dozen persons unfamiliar to you, signify anything? Mr. Tree watched him intently. It might, Stockstill said. I feel they're staring at me. For any particular reason? Because, Mr. Tree said, of the disfiguration of my face. Without an overt motion, Dr. Stockstill managed to glance up and scrutinize his patient. He saw this middle-aged man, heavy-set, with black hair, the stubble of a beard dark against his unusually white skin. He saw circles of fatigue and tension beneath the man's eyes, and the expression in the eyes, the despair. The physicist had bad skin, and he needed a haircut, and his entire face was marred by the worry within him. But there was no disfiguration. Except for the strain visible there, it was an ordinary face. It would not have attracted notice in a group. Do you see the blotches? Mr. Tree said hoarsely. He pointed at his cheeks, his jaw. The ugly marks that set me apart from everybody. No, Stockstill said, taking a chance and speaking directly. They're there, Mr. Tree said. They're on the inside of the skin, of course, but people notice them anyhow and stare. I can't ride on a bus or go into a restaurant or a theatre. I can't go to the San Francisco Opera or the ballet or the symphony orchestra or even a nightclub to watch one of those folk singers. If I do succeed in getting inside, I have to leave almost at once because of the staring and the remarks." "Tell me what they say." Mr. Tree was silent. "As you said yourself," Stockstill said, "you're world famous, and isn't it natural for people to murmur when a world famous personage comes in and seats himself among them? Hasn't this been true for years? And there is controversy about your work, as you pointed out, hostility, and perhaps one hears disparaging remarks. But everyone in the public eye—" "Not that," Mr. Tree broke in. "I expect that. I write articles and appear on the TV, and I expect that. I know that. This has to do with my private life, my innermost thoughts." He gazed at Stockstill and said, "They read my thoughts and they tell me about my private personal life in every detail. They have access to my brain." Paranoia sensitiva, Stockstill thought, although of course there have to be tests. The Rorschach in particular, it could be advanced insidious schizophrenia. These could be the final stages of a lifelong illness process, or "Some people can see the blotches on my face and read my personal thoughts more accurately than others," Mr. Tree said. "I've noted quite a spectrum in ability. Some are barely aware. Others seem to make an instantaneous gestalt of my differences, my stigmata. For example, as I came up the sidewalk to your office, there was a black man sweeping on the other side. He stopped work and concentrated on me, although, of course, he was too far away to jeer at me. Nevertheless, he saw. It's typical of lower-class people, I've noticed, more so than educated or cultured people." "I wonder why that is," Stockstill said, making notes. "Presumably you would know if you're competent at all. The woman who recommended you said you were exceptionally able." Mr. Tree eyed him, as if seeing no sign of ability as yet. "I think I'd better get a background history from you," Stockstill said. "I see that Bonnie Keller recommended me. How is Bonnie? I haven't seen her since last April or so. Did her husband give up his job with that rural grammar school as he was talking about?" "I did not come here to discuss George and Bonnie Keller," Mr. Tree said. "I'm desperately pressed, Doctor. They may decide to complete their destruction of me any time now. This harassment has gone on for so long now that—" He broke off. "Bonnie thinks I'm ill, and I have great respect for her." His tone was low, almost inaudible. "So I said I'd come here at least once." "Are the Kellers still living up in West Marin?" Mr. Tree nodded. "I have a summer place up there," Stockstill said. "I'm a sailing buff. I like to get out on Tamales Bay every chance I get. Have you ever tried sailing?" "No." "Tell me when you were born and where." Mr. Tree said, "In Budapest in 1934. Dr. Stockstill, skillfully questioning, began to obtain in detail the life history of his patient, fact by fact. It was essential for what he had to do. First diagnose and then, if possible, heal. Analysis and then therapy. A man known all over the world who had delusions that strangers were staring at him. How in this case could reality be sorted out from fantasy? What was the frame of reference which would distinguish them one from the other? It would be so easy, Stockstill realized, to find pathology here. So easy and so tempting. A man this hated. I share their opinion, he said to himself, the they that Bluthgeld, or rather Tree, talks about. After all, I'm part of society too, part of the civilization menaced by the grandiose, extravagant miscalculations of this man. It could have been, could someday be, my children blighted because this man had the arrogance to assume that he could not err. But there was more to it than that. At the time, Stockstill had felt a twisted quality about the man. He had watched him being interviewed on TV, listened to him speak, read his fantastic anti-communist speeches, and come to the tentative conclusion that Bluthgeld had a profound hatred for people, deep and pervasive enough to make him want, on some unconscious level, to make him want to jeopardize the lives of millions. No wonder that the director of the FBI, Richard Nixon, had spoken out so vigorously against militant amateur anti-communists in high scientific circles. Nixon had been alarmed, too, long before the tragic era of 1972. The elements of paranoia, with the delusions not only of reference but of grandeur, had been palpable. Nixon, a shrewd judge of men, had observed them, and so had many others. And evidently they had been correct. "I came to America," Mr. Tree was saying, "in order to escape the communist agents who wanted to murder me. They were after me even then. So, of course, were the Nazis. They were all after me." "I see," Stockstill said, writing. "They still are, but ultimately they will fail," Mr. Tree said hoarsely, lighting a new cigarette. "For I have God on my side. He sees my need, and often He has spoken to me, giving me the wisdom I need to survive my pursuers. I am at present at work on a new project, out at Livermore. The results of this will be definitive as regards our enemy." "Our enemy?" Stockstill thought. "Who is our enemy? Isn't it you, Mr. Tree? Isn't it you sitting here rattling off your paranoid delusions? How did you ever get the high post that you hold? Who is responsible for giving you power over the lives of others, and letting you keep that power even after the fiasco of 1972? You and they are surely our enemies. All our fears about you are confirmed. You are deranged. Your presence here proves it. Or does it?" Stockstill thought. "No, it doesn't. And perhaps I should disqualify myself. Perhaps it is unethical for me to try to deal with you, considering the way I feel. I can't take a detached, disinterested position regarding you. I can't be genuinely scientific, and hence my analysis, my diagnosis may well prove faulty." "Why are you looking at me like this?" Mr. Tree was saying. "Beg pardon?" Stockstill murmured. "Are you repelled by my disfigurations?" Mr. Tree said. No, Stockstill said. "It isn't that." "My thoughts, then. You were reading them, and their disgusting character causes you to wish I had not consulted you." Rising to his feet, Mr. Tree moved abruptly toward the office door. "Good day." "Wait!" Stockstill came after him. "Let's get the biographical material concluded at least. We've barely begun." Mr. Tree, eyeing him, said presently, "I have confidence in Bonnie Keller. I know her political opinions. She is not a part of the international communist conspiracy seeking to kill me at any opportunity." He reseated himself, more composed now, but his posture was one of wariness. He would not permit himself to relax a moment in Stockstill's presence, the psychiatrist knew. He would not open up, reveal himself candidly. He would continue to be suspicious, and perhaps rightly, Stockstill thought. As he parked his car, Jim Ferguson, the owner of Modern TV, saw his salesman, Stuart McConchie, leaning on his broom before the shop, not sweeping, but merely daydreaming, or whatever it was he did. Following McConchie's gaze, he saw that the salesman was enjoying not the sight of some girl passing by or some unusual car. Stu liked girls and cars, and that was normal, but was instead looking in the direction of patients entering the office of the doctor across the street. That wasn't normal. And what business of McConchie's was it anyhow? "Look," Ferguson called as he walked rapidly toward the entrance of his shop. "You cut it out. Someday maybe you'll be sick, and how will you like some goof gawking at you when you try to seek medical help?" "Hey," Stuart answered, turning his head. "I just saw some important guy go in there, but I can't recall who." "Only a neurotic watches over other neurotics," Ferguson said, and passed on into the store, to the register, which he opened and began to fill with change and bills for the day ahead. Anyhow, Ferguson thought, wait till you see what I hired for a TV repairman. You'll really have something to stare at. "Listen, McConchie," Ferguson said. "You know that kid with no arms and legs that comes by on that cart? That for Comulus with just those dinky flippers whose mother took that drug back in the early 60s? The one that always hangs around because he wants to be a TV repairman? Stuart, standing with his broom, said, You hired him? Yeah, yesterday while you were out selling. Presently, McConchy said, It's bad for business. Why? Nobody'll see him. He'll be downstairs in the repair department. Anyhow, you have to give those people jobs. It isn't their fault they have no arms or legs. It's those Germans' fault. After a pause, Stuart McConchy said, First you hire me, a black man, and now a foach? Well, I have to hand it to you, Ferguson. You're trying to do right. Feeling anger, Ferguson said, I not only try, I do. I'm not just daydreaming like you. I'm a man who makes up his mind and acts. He went to open the store safe. His name is Hoppy. He'll be in this morning. You ought to see him move stuff with his electronic hands. It's a marvel of modern science. I've seen, Stuart said. And it pains you. Gesturing, Stuart said, It's unnatural. Ferguson glared at him. Listen, don't say anything along the lines of razzing to the kid. If I catch you or any of the other salesmen or anybody who works for me... Okay, Stuart muttered. You're bored, Ferguson said, and boredom is bad because it means you're not exerting yourself fully. You're slacking off and on my time. If you worked hard, you wouldn't have time to lean on that broom and poke fun at poor sick people going to the doctor. I forbid you to stand outside on the sidewalk ever again. If I catch you, you're fired. Oh Christ, how am I supposed to come and go eat? How do I get into the store in the first place? Through the wall? You can come and go, Ferguson decided, but you can't loiter. Glaring after him dolefully, Stuart McConchy protested. Ah, cripes. Ferguson, however, paid no attention to his TV salesman. He began turning on displays and signs, preparing for the day ahead. End of chapter 1.